Next up is Debra Hall, who's on the executive committee of Angel Association, a very loyal supporter of Ice Angels, as Josh and Ross will attest, a great host for dinner. The name of the session is Angels, Angels Everywhere.
I'm going to give at least one person in the room further evidence of his hypothesis. On Monday night in the panel discussion, Ross said that engineers are to blame for all the data in the world, I think was the way you put it. And I'm going to bore you senseless for the next 15 minutes with some data, if my slides, there we go. Okay, what I've been doing is, I've been involved in the sector for 7, 8, 9 years now, and I'm a market researcher by second profession after being an engineer. And so I've been studying what you guys do, basically, and what angels are and do, and I'm going to just quickly walk you through some of the data, not just that I've gathered, but particularly that NZVIF has gathered as well, about the activities through the 2015 year. Collecting data in this sector is a complete nightmare. If you think chasing people to write checks is bad, believe me, chasing people for their data is even worse. So many of you will be familiar with the Young Company Finance Survey, and this is the 2015 year, which basically told us that ups and downs, but a record year in terms of the $61 million invested in 132 deals in 94 companies over the 2015 year, young companies. And these are not just deals that Skiff has gone into. Molly at VIF collects as many deals as she can, whether they're in or not. So that's kind of great news. We put more money into more deals. Just a short plug as a reminder that all of these companies need directors. And if you haven't put your hand up for that, please do. I had a look under the hood, and one of the things that characterized the 2015 year was just how much follow-on we're doing. I think some people have already talked about the balance between the need to keep supporting some of these companies and the way that that impacts on the availability of funding for new companies coming into our portfolios. And so in that year, just 30% of our money went into new companies, with 70%, I think that was the highest that I've seen, going into follow-on rounds. Average deal size there and so on, syndication at 76% of deals were syndicated. This is kind of the breakdown of where we're at, with about 40% still going into seed.
Debra, is that syndication by money value or by...
No, that's by number of deals. Molly, correct me if I'm wrong. Number of deals, yes, thank you. So things are getting complicated in this space, and I'm really... These are Angel Association angel clubs, other full members, associate members, and associate sponsorship members. So since kind of 12 months ago, this space has become very complicated, and I'm conscious that the Angel Capital Association in the US would look at their membership and say, it's the angel clubs, basically. But AANZ has kind of become more of that wider church, with some of the crowdfunding guys being in, certainly the people running startup funds and so on. We all get together, and we had a great meeting yesterday with about 30 of us around the table, all getting together talking about the space. And there's a view that collaborate is really the word that defines what we do in the startup funding sector in New Zealand. So I looked at the actual numbers, and what I did this year is I tried to get everyone to participate, all the clubs, 9 clubs, to participate in giving us their data about how much deals they've done, but also giving us access to their members to survey. And, you know, VIF says since records began, 2006, we've invested $415,000 in the sector, Skiff at around 40 million. The data that the angel groups and the fund members gave me actually correlates pretty well with that, adding up to about the same, and remembering that there's also private and crowd and some overseas investment now going into the sector. Altogether, I've counted a portfolio of about 320 companies that have been supported by all of us, which, it's not a bad thing. And of course, it's been growing, so most of them are still quite young. Then I focused in on the angel groups, the 9 groups we have. I got good data from 8 of them. That tells us that between them they have about 550 members, invested 115 million. When I look at the 190 companies, and this speaks to what the syndication actually is, when I look at the 190 companies in these groups' portfolios, what I find is that there is actually only 51 of those that have more than one angel group in their deal. So when we're talking about syndication, we're often talking about syndicating with other types of funders in the same space, rather than necessarily between the clubs. And so if we look at 2015, what the clubs told me is that those members invested 24 million in 44 companies, and again, 7 of those have more than one angel group. And we had 2 exits, which I'm sure we've all talked a lot about and will continue to see as, it can actually happen, especially the Green Button one, obviously. I was in Optima, not in Green Button. So, one of the things I asked the clubs to tell me is, how many people do you screen? How many of those go on to present to your members, and how many of those get funded by your members? Now, this is 994 screening meetings. That includes individual companies who have met with more than one club, counted as separate meetings, because you follow them through to then did that club ultimately fund them. The odds of getting funded from a screening meeting by the club you're screened by are 8%. Trevor's going, 8%. But in 2015, we saw 174 pitches and 77 of those got funded. So the odds are better if you get to here, obviously. That's good? Yeah? Cool. So then I got access to some of the club's members, and this was really interesting. So 5 of the clubs agreed to let me survey their members individually. I got 166 members to fill in a survey about what they do and why they do it and who they are. And I mean, this won't come as any surprise, except perhaps this one, that I know if you look at the traditional US angel data, most angels are kind of past their working life and have time to spend on the companies as opposed to go to work. About half our angels, just over half, work full time. So that's a bit different. And that then reflects back into the middle-agedness rather than the old-agedness of the, of the base. So, 45 to 64 is generally, I suspect in worldwide terms, quite young to be an angel. Yeah. So that has implications then, of course. But what we're essentially seeing, and I love this Fast Company article, these are not my words, but they're very real, and that's a quote from them, they're very real reasons why this phenomenon exists. And certainly for some of the people, and of course no one in the room, so present company excluded, we are seeing people coming into the angel space who are really just doing it for the same bragging rights that they would have if they went and bought the Harley, dumped the wife, got a flash girlfriend, and all those sorts of things.
Now you're talking.
It's true. Trevor, something to add to your portfolio. So one of the questions I continue to ask is this one. If you had 10 counters and you had to divide them up as to why you're an angel between these 3 things, how would you divide them up? And consistently, every time I've done this for the past 5 or 6 years, we get a 4-3-3 split. What is interesting, though, is some of the clubs have not completely different, but have a significantly different split on their motivation. There's at least one club that's strongly motivated by the give back aspect of this.
So the ones that had no exit.
So some of the things things that might be interesting to you, because I know people often don't talk about their money things in New Zealand. So when I look at the 166 people who did the survey, what I get is average angel portfolio size of 8 companies, of course helped along a lot by some of those spray and pray people in the audience. I think Kerry won't mind me saying he's the leader of the spray and pray group. What is interesting is that on average, people say they're putting 12% of their total investment portfolio into the early stage company space. Median 10, so there are a few outliers there, but that's probably bigger than some of you might think. And although we can only account for 2 exits in our known portfolio, a quarter of our members say they had an exit in 2015, and that included 14% who have a positive exit. And in part that's being driven by at least one club who's had a strategy over the past 12 months, certainly, to actually start killing off some of the non-performers, I suspect. One of the things I ask them, John O'Hara's not here with he's asked nicely, is he? One of the things I ask them is, would you recommend becoming a member of this club to your friends and colleagues? And we get a net promoter score of plus 22, at least it's positive, I always say. And then I ask them how satisfied they are with the various aspects of what their club delivers. People are most positive, and this was across all the clubs, most positive about the number of deals they see, but least positive about the quality of those deals. Most positive about the networking opportunities and the way the club communicates with them. Least positive about the opportunities that the club provides them for mentoring and supporting founders as opposed to just investing in them. So that's really a message for the clubs. The message from me was that every club is different. You have no idea how different you all are. And 16% of the people I surveyed belong to more than one club. So perhaps another version of the spray and pray. What I asked people to tell us was, how long do you spend advising, guiding, mentoring, and directing, that is not working paid, in the companies that you invest in? What this tells us actually is that there's a third of our investors who spend 0, no time at all. They write the check and they go away. 2/3 spend some time. There's about 1/3 who spend over a day a month. And then there's a small number of people who are spending time at least once a week, and in many cases every day of the week. Because the average that came out was 29 days per angel spent on. So this is kind of free time, I guess, that we're putting in. Nearly a month a year on average. A very small number doing heaps of stuff. About 1/3 of my survey were directors, and they generally have about 2 boards each. Obviously, Trevor and Serge, I think, pulled up the numbers. And then advisory boards as well are in there, and often it's the same people who are directors who are also on advisory boards. I'd just like to pick up for a moment on the slightly macro sense of the data, because we're all in there doing this stuff all the time. And one of the reasons that we do that is because it seems to work here. And one of the reasons for that, I think, and this is very recent data just in the past 6 weeks, the World Bank again has come out and said New Zealand is the easiest place in the world to do business, and we've gone from 2 to 1 on being the easiest place to start a business. The credibility of this data was slightly undermined by the third point, which I haven't put on the slide, which says we're also the best place in the world to get a building permit. There must be some really, really bad places, but nevertheless, it is about, starting up things here is easy. It doesn't feel easy for us putting it all the time, but it generally is. And we're also in the social innovation benchmark, 6th in the world, in terms of our social innovation behind some of the bigger Western economies, US, UK, Canada, and so on. So those are the things that Minister Joyce talks about as well, of course, is why we do what we do here and why it works. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about is that we've recently participated in something called the Startup Genome Project. And every time we present data, people ask, well, how do we actually do in a startup sense against the rest of the world? So this is a project being run by a company called Compass, the Global Startup Ecosystem Report. This was their 2015 report. And they basically rank the startup ecosystems in the world there. Silicon Valley, New York, Los Angeles, Boston coming up in the top tier there, Tel Aviv. This year, they've just closed off the data collection, and I'm delighted that we have enough of our startups have participated. New Zealand will be ranked as one of these. I have no idea where we will be ranked, of course. Let's wait and see. But at least we'll have some sense of how we're doing in the context. So thank you to the supporters in this room who helped us also to generate the data for this study and watch this space. And that is me. Thank you.